Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for this media availability. A reminder to reporters on the line to please press *1 to enter the queue if you'd like to ask a question and a follow-up. I will also note that the embargo on the documents, that's the annual report, as well as the news release, is now lifted. With that, I will hand it over to British Columbia's Fire Commissioner, Brian Godlinton.
Thanks very much. Good morning, and thank you for being here. I'm Brian Godlinton, BC's Fire Commissioner. I'm honored to be speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Penticton Indian Band, a member of the Okanagan Nation. I know we all are aware of the national wildfire situation and the impacts to so many. And today, I'm going to share information with you about another kind of fire, the fires that are happening in residential homes and apartments, and what all of us can do to make ourselves safer. We are having too many fires, and too many people are losing their lives in structure fires when those deaths could have been prevented. And the province is taking steps to help. It has provided $1.6 million for my office to work with the BC Injury Research and Prevention Unit on a smoke alarm and social marketing campaign this fall. This directly supports the Office of the Fire Commissioner's mission, which is to reduce the number of fires, fire-related injuries, and deaths. My office and the fire service act on this mission by enforcing British Columbia's fire safety legislation. We lead provincial fire prevention, reporting programs, promote fire safety awareness, and establish training standards for all firefighters. The Office of the Fire Commissioner also provides structure fire expertise during emergencies. For example, we work with BC Wildfire when wildfires are burning in areas where there are residential homes and other structures. Today, the province released the Office of the Fire Commissioner's 2022 annual report that describes fire statistics and trends. Over the last 5 years, we've seen a concerning increase in fires, fire-related injuries, and fire-related deaths. In 2022, there were over 9,000 fires, a 31% increase from the 6,900 fires reported in 2018. In 2022, there were 86 fire-related deaths, a 207% increase from the 28 fire deaths reported in 2018. 35% of fires in 2022 were structure fires, which resulted in the greatest number of injuries and deaths. Most fire-related injuries and death occur within people's homes, primarily started by smoking materials and open flames and cooking equipment. Another notable finding is that people over the age of 65 were overrepresented in fire-related deaths. Some of the increase in deaths are because more people have been spending more time at home following COVID. Fire reporting has also improved. This does not change the fact that the number of deaths for such a preventable cause are far too high. Today, Statistics Canada released aggregated fire data from 2015 to 2021 for 7 jurisdictions, including BC. The trends for BC are consistent with that data. There has been an increase in the number of fire-related deaths with a significant rise during COVID. It is important to note that the death rates were significantly lower whenever fires occurred in structures with smoke alarms and sprinklers. The presence of smoke alarms and sprinklers significantly reduced the extent to which the fire spread beyond the room where the fire occurred. I can't emphasize enough, working smoke alarms remain the most effective preventing injuries and deaths. Working smoke alarms can reduce the risk of fire deaths by 50%. In 2022, only 45% of all reported residential structure fires in our province had a working smoke alarm. We need to change that. The good news indicates a significant public safety opportunity for the fire services and communities to increase fire prevention and education. Through focused public education, I'm confident we can prevent injuries and save lives. That's why the smoke alarm I mentioned earlier is so important. In addition, the province has partnered with Statistics Canada on a community fire risk reduction dashboard. These two projects in combination will help the fire services prevent fires, reduce injuries, and save lives. The dashboard will provide statistical and geographical information to help the fire services identify areas in communities at greatest risk of structure fires, areas that would benefit most from fire prevention, education, and tools to keep people safe. The dashboard was piloted last year in 11 communities, including Coquitlam, Surrey, and Port Alberni. And we intend to roll the dashboard out provincially in the next few weeks. And I want to bring this point home again and talk about what you can do. A working smoke alarm and sprinkler systems create the greatest opportunity for surviving a fire. Today, structure fires burn hotter and faster than ever. With new materials in our homes, you may only have 60 seconds to escape once a fire starts. The good news is you can do things to ensure the fire doesn't start. And if it does, that you have an escape plan. A working smoke alarm gives you the notification and the time required to exit your home and call 911. The public education campaign will include helpful tips for people, such as test your smoke alarms monthly, have an escape plan, replace the batteries as soon as the smoke alarm indicates low battery, and replace all smoke alarms when they're 10 years old. Current alarms use different types of technology, including multi-sensing, which combines smoke and carbon monoxide detection. In this day and age, everyone can be protected by a smoke alarm that meets their individual needs. I'm confident with our more comprehensive reporting, data analytics, and the education, including social marketing campaigns, we can prevent future injuries and save lives. And lastly, get to know your local fire services. They are there to help you stay safe. They can answer your questions about where to put a smoke alarm or a carbon monoxide detector. Just before I take questions, I'd like to share a recent story that will, I hope, make what I said real. It's about how a smoke alarm saved a family and their property in the community of Blackpool just a few months ago. In the early morning, the family is awakened by a smoke alarm activated. 2 children and their parents were able to exit the home. They called 911, and in this case, the smoke alarm not only saved their lives, it saved their home. And 12 months prior, the Blackpool firefighters installed a smoke alarm in their home. This is yet another example of the local fire services efforts and a home safety program proving they save lives. And again, thank you for being here today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much to the Fire Commissioner. A reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You'll be limited to 1 question and 1 follow-up. Our first question today comes from Chad Pawson, CBC. Chad, please go ahead.
Hey, Brian, thanks for taking the questions. There's a lot of responsibility put on residents to make sure they have the working smoke alarms. What advice do you have for builders, developers, landlords, property owners about their responsibility in making sure that their buildings have working smoke alarms and sprinklers?
Thank you very much for the question. I think we all have responsibility and a level of responsibility here. And certainly as we talk about the developers, to your question and so forth, that would all be covered under the new and updated Canadian 2020 building codes and standards. That said, as it relates to residents and landlords and so forth, we all have a responsibility, and not only for one another, but for our friends and for our families, to ensure that our loved ones have smoke alarms, and that we're checking back with people that might not be living in our communities and may be in BC or around the provinces. We all have a level of responsibility to ensure that all of our loved ones have a working smoke alarm in their home.
Chad, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. Brian, several of your annual reports have drawn attention to this dramatic rise in fire-related deaths and injuries. There's been campaigns done by your office, local firefighters, community groups. Are you surprised that we're still seeing such a dramatic further increase in these deaths, considering there seems to have been a fair amount of advocacy around this issue?
Yeah, I think this is a real opportunity here. This is a collective effort on behalf of the Canadian fire marshals and fire commissioners across Canada. There's a lot of proactive work being done in behind the scenes, looking at the statistics and trends and how they can influence fire and building code changes, and these opportunities to see and curb the trend. But currently we are looking for innovative tools. And I think the partnership with Statistics Canada, that BC is the only province at this point in time that has the geospatial tool. I know Ontario is going to be rolling that out in September of this year, and it'll go countrywide. But I think these are the necessary steps where we've taken historical fire data and overlaying that with many different layers and data sets to really identify the areas and communities at greatest risk. So with what limited resources local governments and communities have, that it's a targeted, focused approach to address these concerns. And so we are looking at doing things differently, more effectively, and more efficiently with what resources are available.
We have another question on the line. We go to Ashley Joanno, Canadian Press. Ashley, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I know that the report says that only 45% of residential structure fires had working smoke alarms. I'm wondering whether that percentage, how that percentage has changed as the death numbers have climbed. Are you seeing have you seen fewer people over that stretch of time having smoke alarms?
The number's been fluctuating up and down a few percent either way, but nowhere near where it needs to be. We need to look across the country, across the continent, and look at what's happening in the UK and Sweden and some of these other areas where we're at 92%, 98%. And really, I think what we're starting to see is what one may call a wear-off factor, that if there's not ongoing public education and efforts in and around that and awareness and education, then it wears off and people forget and they take it for granted and assume their smoke alarm is going to work and going to function, and that's certainly not the case. So this is why we are taking a substantial investment in partnering with the BC Injury Prevention Unit and really looking at those that are overrepresented and making sure that we are getting out to the target audiences to start to address these issues and trends so we can curb them and see them go in the right direction.
Ashley, do you have a follow-up?
I do. One of the contributing factors you mentioned is an increase in homelessness and an increase in the number of encampments. I'm wondering if you could talk about that a bit and maybe talk about how many of the fires and how many of the deaths came as a result of homelessness and homelessness encampments.
Yeah, the report does speak to some of the ongoing challenges of people experiencing homelessness, and unfortunately, we are seeing an increase of that across the country. We are partnering with cross-ministry working groups within the province of British Columbia and working with local fire services and local governments as a whole to learn at some of the best practices on some of the safety measures and equipment and some of the pieces that the people experiencing homelessness around the province would benefit from to try to mitigate the fires before they start. And so that work is still ongoing. There's been some investments of numerous products that has been shared through a number of communities that we're continuing to measure. And it's really down to public education and so forth, and open flame, and not having that in and around tents and so forth. So ongoing work. We have seen an increase in fires. The deaths have been relatively stable, and one death is just one death too many. So we need to work collectively, and I think the province has really shown some great initiatives of not just having one ministry. There's many ministries in the cross-ministry working groups supporting local governments on people experiencing homelessness.
Our next question comes from Wolf Dettner, Black Press. Wolf, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. The provincial government has been pushing for creating more density around the province to help solve some of the housing crisis, that we have in this province. What is your reaction about to that development? How concerned are you from a fire safety perspective with this push toward greater density?
I think this is a reality, not just in British Columbia. This has happened again across the country, and sheer the cost of real estate. And so we are seeing a densification take place, and the building code and fire codes and so forth are addressing a number of the concerns based on the building materials. And a great example is the sprinkler of sprinklers on balconies and so forth, where a lot of fires take place. And so when we talk about multi-unit complex fires, and yes, we have seen an increase, 10% of fires are in those multi-unit complexes. Where we're seeing those fires taking place are on the old building inventory and the old building stock that was built under previous codes and standards. And so we are looking at, what steps and what measures could be taken place to start to address those areas and those challenges where those fires are taking place. But as it relates to the densification now under current codes and so forth, we're very comfortable with the fire protection systems and measures in place to make sure that the residents are safe.
And Wolf, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. You touched on this a little bit earlier in your remarks, and that concerns the number of deaths related to fires. And as you pointed out, the individuals involved tend to be older. BC society is aging, and I'm wondering what if any specific measures would you like to see within the fire code to sort of specifically address some of the issues around aging, specifically around mobility issues, other types of issues around sort of this aging of BC society.
Thanks for the question. As it relates to mobility issues and so forth, there is that those are addressed in the Canadian Building Code and so forth. So, but we have seen an increase, and I think it relates back to the public education piece, is that people are living longer and they're living in their homes longer. And so as it relates to that, I think we need to take a multi-pronged approach in ensuring that our loved ones and our seniors and our aging populations have working smoke alarms. We can't rely on all fire services and firefighters to respond to each and every residence. And so again, back to the earlier statement I made, that we all have a responsibility here. And I think there are some opportunities that we're going to be exploring here in our office, is partnering with the different health authorities around the province. And when we have the health authorities and some of their care aides and nurses and so forth in those homes, there's a real opportunity here to have other people that are visiting the aging population's homes, just to ensure a quick smoke alarm check and so forth. There's some quick win opportunities here, that just another way to do things a little bit differently and more effectively. In many communities, when the fire department responds to an event at someone's home, whether it's a medical event or any type of situation, they are checking in many cases, do you have a working smoke alarm? But for those who aren't calling 911 that wouldn't have had that experience, we need to ensure that there's others with that multi-pronged approach taking a public education initiative forward to ensure that they do have working smoke alarms.
And we have what looks to be our final question. Cindy Harnett, Times columnist, please go ahead.
Hi there. This is a fairly basic question, but I wonder if you can review what type of fire alarms you're urging British Columbians to get. If you walk into the store, there's a dizzying amount of ionization, photoelectric, combo, carbon monoxide ones, Wi-Fi, wired, battery. Are there ones that you specifically suggest?
No. All the smoke alarms, and for that matter, other protection measure systems, are all UL and CSA approved and so forth to be sold in Canada. So any store that any residents attend to renew or to purchase a new smoke alarm should have a level of confidence that what you're purchasing is going to keep you safe.
Cindy, do you have a follow-up?
You don't specific, any fire alarm is better than no fire alarm, but you don't recommend a certain type, if I understand that answer correctly. And also, what about, and we're talking a lot about people living in poverty, are there programs to help them purchase these fire alarms?
Smoke alarms are required in every residence. Should be obviously always near where we're sleeping and so forth. And so the code clearly identifies that. But for somebody's experiencing homelessness, some may have smoke alarms and so forth, and some may not. Some are, sleeping in tents, and some are not. So as it relates to the working smoke alarm, as I mentioned, I think you can attend whichever store you go to procure or to purchase a smoke alarm. There's not one brand that I would recommend over the other. They're all approved and they all will save lives.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation and